Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics common to both the PowerBasic console and Windows compilers. Today we will look at coding tips for your applications and the use of libraries. In the previous video, we had looked at some coding tips, mostly to do with naming conventions and setting prerequisites up for your application to run. Today we're going to be looking at libraries. What are they and why you should be using them? First of all, we'll look at the console compiler. The console compiler is often used to write applications which have little or no user interaction. These can be background programs which calculate information based on data coming in and create data going out. One common use is the processing of files. If we look at the console application we have on screen at the moment, you'll see that I've highlighted a line of code which starts with the word include. This include command instructs PowerBasic to add in another code library to the application at compile time. This include file can contain a great deal of code. It can even nest into additional libraries. The library we have highlighted here is the Win32 API include file. This is a file that ships with PowerBasic and gives you access to the full Windows 32 application programming interface. When PowerBasic compiles your application, it will look inside each referenced library to see if any of the functions, code, or statements are referenced in your code. If they are, then this code will be compiled and linked into your application executable. If there are functions and subroutines within these included files that are not referenced within your own code, then that code will not be included in your eventual compiled application. This is known as dead code removal. This means the size of your executable will be as small as possible. So why should you consider using libraries? If within this application we're going to be doing lots of file handling, reading data from files into arrays, saving data from arrays into files, and generally doing a lot of file handling. These types of functions and subroutines will be common to many applications, and to save you having to rewrite them or paste them in every time you wish to write a new application, if you include this code in an include file, you can reference it in a single line of code and bring all this useful functionality into your application. So we have now added the PB file handling routines include file to our application with one line of code. If we have a look to see what that particular library has in it, we can drag that into our compiler. And there is the include file for PB file handling routines. It contains a number of functions, which I've documented at the top of the file. So by adding this include file to our application, we can now reference all the functions within this file. This means a lot of common functionality can be included on all of your applications by setting up a number of these library files. If you are working in a team, it means code that you have written can be used by other members of the team. This of course saves time because they are not reinventing the wheel every time they want to do something that you or another programmer has already coded. So the use of libraries will speed up the development that you wish to do. As we can see from the Explorer window we now have on screen, these library files, the include files, are in the same folder as our executable. But this does not necessarily have to be the case. You can have a path in the include file statement. What I've done with these include file paths is I put two dots at the beginning of the path, which instructs PowerBasic and Windows to go up one directory and then down into the libraries folder. And then the name of the include file is stated after that. If we look at that in Explorer, we'll see we now have a libraries folder which contains the 4 files we wish to bring in. If we attempt to compile this application now, it will compile quite cleanly. In order to see just what's being included in our application, we can change one of the options. If we go to the menu at the top of the screen, pick Options, go to Compiler, we can click on Detailed Results. If we hit OK on that, and then do another compilation, we can see all the component files that PowerBasic has considered for compilation. As you will see, this is a significant number of files. Most of these are coming from the Windows API we included at the beginning, plus our own library files at the end. And we can see the code that has been extracted. These are all the functions which have been pulled out of these library files and included in your application. Many of these, as I said, are coming from the Windows API. So what's the advantage of keeping your include files in a library folder? If you have your include files copied into the folder containing your own executable, there's always a danger that you will make some change to a library file and not copy it back to the common area. The whole point of library files is that all members of the development team will be able to access the most recent version. So keeping them in a common location that everyone can have access to, and is where you compile from, is always an advantage. This way your application can be built up from a common set of component libraries. So when starting a brand new application, one thing you will want to do at the beginning is to decide what libraries are going to be needed within this application. And once you start your development, you will probably have to create a number of new functions which do not exist within these libraries. If you find these functions could have a use later in future applications, you can of course create a new library, thereby saving yourself time in the future and the time of your fellow developers. These libraries, of course, can be passed to anyone who codes in PowerBasic. So now that we've looked at the console compiler, let's now look at the Windows compiler. As far as libraries are concerned, you can do exactly the same thing with the Windows compiler. As with the console compiler, you can have your libraries in the same folder as your main application. Or they could be in a nested folder underneath your application, or in the folder above, or even in a hard-coded networked location. However, there is something else with libraries we're going to look at now. We have 4 libraries here: the file handling routines, the macro library, a button plus library, and a library to load JPEGs as bitmaps. If we attempt to compile this application, it will give us an error. The error that's coming up for this particular compile is that there is a function within one library which is already referenced in a previous library. So we have a name conflict here. PowerBasic doesn't know which one to include. PowerBasic will not allow you to pull in 2 functions or subroutines of the same name from different libraries. So how can we handle this? Well, we can see in here the function it's complaining about is a function called GDI plus shutdown. This is in the button plus include file and is also in the pbloadjpg as bitmap file. So when we find there is a common set of functions in 2 other libraries which may well need to be loaded within your application, we need to find a way of taking this common code out and putting it into a new library. So that's what we're going to do now. There are 4 things within this library which we need to strip out and put into its own library: the 2 types, and the startup and the shutdown. So if we select all of these and put them in a new library. So we're going to save this into a file called pbgdi plus common.include. And we will want to remove these, or for the moment we'll just comment them out in here. And we'll also load up the other file which it was complaining about. And within the button plus include file, we will comment out this section as well. And we will also comment out the 2 types. And having updated these 2 existing libraries, we can now put our new library in at the beginning. If we try compiling that now, it will compile quite cleanly. However, you may not want to include GDI plus inside your application. So one option we have is to include this in the button plus library and the load JPEG library. So another safety tip for including these is to use the once option. If we look inside these two libraries, we can put the word once after the word include. What this does is PowerBasic will only attempt to include it if it has not been included already, and your application will compile quite cleanly. This is very useful. Say for example, our load JPEG as bitmap also needed to include the PB file handling routines library. Well, if we put the once after each of these, then PowerBasic would work out this for you, and would only include each library once. This saves you a great deal of coding. In previous versions of PowerBasic, you had to include some constant within your libraries and then test for that at compilation time. Now adding the simple once word after include means you don't have to do that anymore. So now any complex nesting of libraries and dependencies is handled for you. As with everything in development, a lot of this comes down to documentation. Documenting what your libraries do will be advantageous if you're working in a team, because the new team member who joins your team will need to know which libraries are available for use, and what they all do. And taking this component approach of building your applications will speed up your development significantly. And ideally, when one of these libraries needs to be amended, either to have new functions in it, or perhaps changing the parameters of existing functions, you will want to do a continuous integration approach, by which all your applications can be automatically recompiled to ensure that they still compile cleanly. We've covered this in a previous video. I'll put a link in the description to that video so you can have a look at continuous integration. Hopefully you'll find these approaches useful in your applications, but that's it for today. Thank you for watching.